Hello. I'm going to read the next part of the first step, which I stopped on page 9 yesterday. We're starting on page 10 today. This one's called Stanley's Story. And just a reminder that this is Melody Beattie's Codependent's Guide to the 12 Steps. And doing videos like this helps me stay accountable and making sure that I do this. If you happen to stumble across this video, thank you for joining. Please leave a comment or let me know somehow that you enjoy me reading this. But if you don't enjoy it, I apologize. I'm not the best reader, not the best at vocabulary. So anyways, yeah, just thanks for being kind. All right, here we go. Stanley's story. Stanley is a successful architect in his 50s. It took him 16 years to notice the unmanageability and chaos in his life. 16 years of denying, putting up with, pretending, and going deeper into hiding within himself before he saw the truth. Stanley's father is an alcoholic. Stanley's wife's father died of alcoholism. And after 16 years of trying to control his youngest son, Stanley reached to the point of emotional collapse. By the time our youngest son, John, was 6, I knew we were in trouble, Stanley said. By the time our youngest son, John, was 6, I knew we were in trouble, Stanley said. He constantly fought at school. He was belligerent and refused to do his homework. At home, he caused problems. He hollered at his mother, swore at her, and sometimes hit her. My wife and I fought all the time. I tried to be understanding. She had special circumstances. She had been in the camps during World War II, and she believed children should be loved and adored. She didn't want us to discipline John. John caused complete chaos at home. He was bright. He knew how to push everyone's buttons. He had my wife and I fighting. His siblings and I fighting. A bit precocious, but he'd outgrow this stage. That session was the beginning of $20,000 after insurance coverage of fruitless family counseling. When John was 11, Stanley's wife threw up her arms in despair and walked out of a school counseling session. She was tired. She had given all she could to the situation. She vowed never to set foot inside a school again. A short time later, she moved out, leaving Stanley to raise the 3 children alone. By the time John was 12, Stanley was spending more time in school than John. Stanley was there 3 days a week, explaining why John was only there 2 days a week. The only way I could get John graduated from the 9th to the 10th grade was by promising to leave that school system. Stanley said, How codependent is that? Was promising to leave the school. I sold our home and moved to another school system so the school would graduate John. On one occasion, Stanley came home to find his middle son, Jeremy, choking John. Jeremy had his hands around John's neck and had lifted him off the ground. Jeremy quietly said that he had put up with John for 12 years and could not do it any longer. Another time, Stanley walked into the room just as John was throwing a knife at another child. Stanley was able to deflect the course of the knife, causing it to pierce a window screen instead of the boy. When John was 16, things came to a head. By then, Stanley's wife had moved back home. One Sunday, Stanley was in the den watching football, and his wife was in the kitchen preparing brunch. John walked into the kitchen and began arguing with his mother. Stanley listened as their discussion escalated and their voices grew louder. I was afraid, said Stanley. John still acted abusively towards his mother, hollering at her and sometimes hitting her. I wasn't going to let that happen again. Stanley walked into the kitchen just as John was about to strike his mother. Stanley grabbed John and restrained him in a bear hug. When he did this, his wife came to John's rescue. She started pulling at Stanley, trying to get him to let John loose. Then Jeremy, the middle son, walked into the kitchen. He started pulling at his mother, trying to get her to leave Stanley alone so he could restrain John. The four of them toppled to the floor. Stanley cut his head open. Blood gushed out. Stanley let John loose, ran to the car, drove to the emergency room at the hospital, received 45 stitches, and drove back home. Then in the living room stood Jeremy and John, toe to toe. They were still going at it. They were ready to duke it out, said Stanley. My wife was standing next to them, watching. She didn't know what to do. The boys were fully grown. John was 6 feet tall and weighed 175 pounds. Both of them had been trained in martial arts. Damn it, Stanley said. If there is going to be any fight around here, I'm going to do it. Then Stanley stepped in between the two boys and punched them both. The next day, Jeremy moved out. A few weeks later, the oldest sister moved out. 2 weeks after that, Stanley moved out. 2 months later, Stanley's wife moved out. A 16-year-old boy had gained complete control of the house and 2 dogs, Stanley said. That was it. I moved back in. 2 weeks later, a school counselor called Stanley. I think you've got a problem, she said. The counselor then informed Stanley that John was using drugs and had been since he was 8 years old, a fact that $20,000 worth of counseling and therapy had failed to reveal. By then, when he wasn't dealing with the school or police officials, Stanley was spending his days locked in his office, head down on his desk, crying. I was drained and felt totally devoid of any worth of a human being. Stanley began attending Al-Anon, then Families Anonymous. He was ready to face and accept his powerlessness and the unmanageability in his own life. He was ready to detach and begin taking care of himself. The epilogue to this story is John went to treatment but wasn't successful. Later on, after going to jail on a narcotics cell charge, he began a true recovery. He is now a successful businessman and has a close relationship with his father. Stanley and his wife divorced. Jeremy and the oldest sister are not yet in recovery for codependency. Stanley has lost 100 pounds, exercises regularly, feels peaceful and hopeful about life, and takes care of himself daily. I almost feel like that's the answer to everything. Everybody's got to let go of their control. It's not just one person in the family. Everybody in the family. Everybody in the family has to let go of their control. It's nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault, and it's nobody's responsibility. We're all in charge of ourselves. That's it. All right, so stay tuned for next time. I'll read the next part of this chapter. We're on chapter 1, and I do like keeping these short so I can sit with what I read and marinate in it. And then I'll come back tomorrow and read a little bit more. Thanks again. Talk to you later. Bye.